You don't have to be perfect to be consistent. You just have to be faithful, because God calls you to faithfulness, not flawless performance. Welcome to the Soul Hemingway Podcast, the podcast where faith meets clarity and clarity meets purpose. I'm your host, Soul Hemingway, and we're here to talk about what it really means to own your faith, break free from cycles, and walk boldly in the calling that God's placed on your life. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Soul Hemingway Podcast. We are in the official first episode of this podcast. I'm your host, Soul Hemingway, and in this podcast, we talk about everything with faith, clarity, and purpose, and redirecting you on the path to own your own faith. Now, today, I was so excited to release this episode because I wanted to kick it off with something that I thought was relatable to everybody, okay? I didn't want it to be exclusive to some audiences and unrelatable to other audiences and really targeting down a narrow group of people. I think this is something universally we struggle with as human beings, really, not even just Christians, and that is consistency, right? Especially in today's modern world where dopamine has quite literally ravaged our minds. Consistency with things are just it's such a hard thing to do in today's world where we're constantly getting pulled in every which way for our focus, right? Everything is demanding our focus, and we have so many things to manage and micromanage that we can't really be consistent with a lot of things because we're always running to other things and we get drained and things like that. And so maybe for you, in a Christian context, that's Bible reading plans. You're saying I want to read X, Y, and Z chapters of the Bible a day. I want to, read out of this, and that. One thing I struggle with, and so I've been doing this Proverbs reading challenge, reading a book of Proverbs a day. And so far I haven't missed a day, but I also, before I even started that, I was doing a deep study of 1st and 2nd Samuel. I hadn't read 1st and 2nd Samuel in maybe 4 days now. And maybe, honestly, probably closer to a week, actually, if I'm being honest. It's probably been closer to a week since I've opened up 1st and 2nd Samuel. Now, and that's a hard thing. That's something I struggle with. I struggle with consistency in my Bible reading, especially with that. Going to the gym, maybe. Maybe you're a gym rat like me. I struggle with being consistent in the gym too. It's a hard thing sometimes, I need to go today, actually. I hadn't been yet today. Didn't go yesterday. Well, they were closed yesterday, so that's a different topic. But, it's just those kind of things, right? Those things that are good for you and are going to help advance you in life, but they're difficult to actually go about and do for whatever reason, and maybe it's your prayer life, you're so deep in your prayer one night and then the next morning for the rest of that day, it's just radio silence. You have no prayer on your mind and your heart whatsoever. And you're just trying to wonder why, you're just not all the way there as far as why. And so I have two verses that I think are pivotal for just recognizing things regarding inconsistency. And they're both really just highlighting the sin problem, but I want you to kind of focus on what I'm about to say next. Okay, so both come out of Romans chapter 3. Okay, so for the first one is the popular Romans 3:23. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? Inconsistency is universal. So it highlights all, okay? All have sinned. It's not something that, is exclusive to some people and, not relatable for other people. Everyone struggles with consistency. Some people have done better with their consistency and have kind of scheduled their lives in a way that they can be consistent and they've built that structure. But everyone at one point struggles with inconsistency in just every aspect of life. And then the second verse is Romans 3:10-12. And it says, no one is righteous, no, not one. There's no one who understands, no one that seeks for him. All have turned away and have together become ultimately worthless. There was no one who does good, no, not one. And so I really want to highlight, Paul, when he's in Romans, Paul is highlighting specifically that there's not a single one of us that doesn't struggle with these things, that is actually above one another in in our consistencies with our relationship with God and things like that. We are all on the same playing field. We're playing the same game. We're fighting the same battle. We're fighting against the same demons. There's not exclusive to certain people. And I want to highlight that because I personally look at really successful people's lives, cool, these high-end, business entrepreneurs or these top-tier athletes or maybe just these really successful people who have went and made a name for themselves. And I'm thinking man, the amount of consistency that they must have, I don't understand what's in their brain that I don't have. And the only thing that's different between what they've done and what I have done and what you have done is not that they don't struggle with consistency. It's the fact that they do struggle with consistency, but they've allowed themselves to work it out in a way where they don't have to lose to inconsistency. And so the main verse I really wanted to highlight, and I'm going to grab my Bible over here. The main verse I really wanted to highlight for this is Proverbs 29, verse 18. And it says, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. But blessed is one who heeds wisdom's instruction. And so I really want to highlight that first half of the verse, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. A lot of like what we deal with when it comes to being consistent in our life, like as far as good aspects go, whether that's Bible reading or praying or going to the gym or whatever that may look like for you, a lot of that stems from having some sort of vision, having some sort of end goal that you're chasing, right? And so I really think that when we're inconsistent, I think it really just stems from a lack of proper clarity. So if I had to paraphrase like Proverbs 29:18, I would say without vision, people perish, right? And it's also in the scriptures, like my people perish for a lack of knowledge. But that's kind of, it's not necessarily relevant, but it is relevant to this as well. Because I think if we're perishing for a lack of knowledge, can we apply that to our lives? I say yes, because we ruin our lives because we don't know what we want. And because we don't know what we want and why we want it and what we're doing it for, then we don't actually end up being consistent with any sort of things that help us move towards our goals. And so if we apply this to a relationship with Christ, we don't necessarily know why we believe in Christ. So that's that lack of knowledge. Therefore, your Christian walk, your relationship with God suffers, your relationship with Jesus suffers, and so now you're perishing because you have a lack of knowledge. And so when it says that in the scriptures, I think it can be applicable for just any sort of domain in life, any sort of human endeavor. And so going back to Proverbs 29:18, like without revelation, then people lack restraint. Without vision, people perish. And so when we think about these things, if you don't know what it is you're doing and why, so you say like, oh, I want to get into a Bible plan. Oh, I want to, start reading my Bible more every day. I want to start going to the gym. I want to like pray more. Great. But why are we doing those things? Why? They're not bad things. Do them. But why? If you can't answer the why question, then how do you expect yourself to actually be able to push yourself in order to do it? I like to read my Bible. So for me personally, I like to be consistent with my Bible because I feel and I recognize that every single time I open up the Word, and it's daily in my life, like it's a daily supplement of my life, I gain more wisdom. That wisdom helps me understand Jesus more. And by understanding Jesus more, I feel closer to him daily. That's my why for wanting to be in the Word at least once a day, bare minimum. Okay. My why for wanting to pray, because when I'm struggling with something, which I struggle with a lot of things, I find that every single time I pray, I find comfort and somebody to pour it out with. I can be honest in the face of God instead of having to hide it and try and push it down and things like that. So if you can't answer the why question, then I don't think you're ever going to actually have that willpower to continue to be consistent in whatever it is you want to be consistent in. And so like my second point is like willpower, it fails, right? We burn out. There's this like common phrase that discipline is better than motivation, which is entirely true. But what do we do when we're not motivated and we don't have the disciplines yet? That's where that clarity of the vision, that's where that vision comes, and it actually aids us in being able to pursue our goals effectively. And so like, again, if you understand what it is you're doing and the why behind what you're doing, if your goal is to read one, chapter of the Bible a day, but you don't know why you want to do it, you just feel like it's something right to do, then you're probably not going to follow through with that. But if you're actually seeking something out of the scriptures by reading one proverb a day, like let's take my thing, like I read a proverb a day. like not just like one verse, but like a chapter. And I also make it a goal to memorize one verse from the chapter every single time. So I'm retaining information, I'm retaining wisdom, I'm retaining things, and I'm taking away, because that's my goal. I'm not just reading it because, I feel like I want to read it, but I'm reading it because I have a goal in mind. I have a why behind the consistency. But another thing I think we struggle with when it comes to being consistent in our lives, and this is like evident in our society as a whole right now, is our dopamine addictions. Like scrolling first thing in the morning will literally kill the rest of your day. And I can attest to this firsthand. If I find myself scrolling first thing in the morning, like I wake up and the first thing I do is turn over to my phone, open up Instagram, check my likes, check my followers, scroll a little bit, check my DMs, whatever it is, it sets the tone for the rest of the day. But if I wake up and I immediately I just get up, I don't stay in bed, and I move past my phone and I go and sit in the Word first thing in the morning, it sets the tone for the rest of the day. Now I'm fully reflective and fully reverent on the presence of God. And so that's such a critical thing. We've become so addicted to cheap and instant dopamine that on the wake up, it's like immediately, it's like an immediate hit. Like I want you to, and some people actually might do this, but I want you to imagine if you were like a weed addict and the first thing you did when you woke up is you rolled over and you had I don't know if I can say it, but you had a roll of weed on your pillow and you roll and you light it and smoke first thing in the morning. But then you go and say, man, I'm really trying to quit smoking. I'm really trying to get my, health together. I'm really trying to stop, I'm really trying to put the weed down. And, throughout the rest of the day, you may not smoke, but then the first thing you do every morning is you still smoke. I want you to think about that. Does that really free your mind from weed? Does that really free your mind from the thing that you're trying to get away from? Because if you're setting your tone for the day with that thing, then of course it's going to be on your mind and you're not actually going to be focused entirely on your goal. And so in the same way, when we're trying to develop an intimate relationship with God that is consistent, and the first thing we do when we wake up is immediately consume mindless content, we immediately check our phones, and it's not like a sin to do that or anything. It's not like a bad thing. Sometimes, it's whatever, okay? But if it's an everyday thing, then what you're doing is you're making it harder for yourself to be consistent in the things you want to, because you're already satisfied, right? You wake up and you're satisfied because you've got your dopamine hits, you've got your scrolling, you got your doom scrolling, and you've got your distractions. So now you're not going to want to do anything else. You're not going to want to actually put in any work to achieve anything else because you've already been satisfied mentally and psychologically, And there's this quote. It goes, "We fail because we don't care. We fail because we don't have anchors." So we don't care enough to put away the things that are distracting us. And we fail because we don't have the anchors and the whys behind what we do. And so when we're trying to get closer to God, but we're inconsistent with our relationship, it's either we fail because we just generally don't care about our relationship with God enough to actually put forth the effort, or we fail in our relationship with God because we don't have the anchors and the necessary whys behind why we want a relationship with God, right? People tell us we want a relationship with God, but why do we want that relationship with God? What does it mean to you to be in relationship with Jesus? What does it mean for you to actually desire Jesus the way that you do? Is it something that you want just because people have told you to want it and you've watched these TikTok clips and they've told you to want it and all these things? Or is it something that you want because you feel like you've gained something from being in a relationship with Jesus? If you feel like you've gained nothing from being in a relationship with Jesus, then why are you still in it? If you feel like there's something to gain, though, that's what should anchor you. That's what should keep you consistent in your relationship with Jesus at all times. That's what your focus is on, And so I have a list of scriptures here where we can I don't necessarily want to say frame consistency, but I really just want to highlight Romans 5:8. And I'm actually flip over there for a second. I want to highlight Romans 5:8. I was trying to decide which one I want to go into, but I think I like Romans 5:8. And I just want to read it out loud to you guys, because I think the way that Jesus operates in his ministry, and I think the way that Paul talks about Jesus in his letters and in his writings, I think it's very, very applicable to us. Romans 5:8, it says, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." And so what does that have to do with consistency? I think when we think of consistency, God is consistent in his love for us, even when we are inconsistent. So God is demonstrating what it means to have a consistent, fruitful, anchored relationship and desire for relationship, because it says, even while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. There is a consistency in the love that God has for us that we lack for him, because how many of us are going to really endure for the sake of God? I would hope, my hope is to be able to say that I can, but oftentimes I find that I'm not able to. And so I have to really be anchored in my consistency, but my consistency can only come if I'm actually anchored in why I run a relationship with God. Romans 5:8, again, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That is a form of consistent love of God. Even when we were in the worst state imaginable, when we were at the very lowest point of our lives, whether that's physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever, when we were doing the worst of the worst and we were like spitting on the face of God, he still loved us to the degree that he was able to manifest into a human 2,000 years ago and die an excruciating death for you and for me so that we might experience salvation. And even today, he's still consistent within his love. He sent us the Holy Spirit. I think of John 14, I believe it's 8 or 7. Spirit of truth, right? He instills the spirit of truth within us. And so now we have another tool for God to demonstrate his consistency within his love for us. And so what are some practical ways we can actually move out of inconsistency with our relationship with God and go into a more consistent, more fruitful, just a overall higher quality relationship with Jesus? Number one, I want you to replace your screen time with prayer. And that doesn't mean you can't ever check your phone. That doesn't mean you can't ever scroll. You can't ever do anything like this. But if you're always checking your phone first thing in the morning, or if you're always scrolling late at night, or if you're going to eat and you're by yourself and you just find yourself scrolling mindlessly while you eat or while you're working, replace that with intentional prayer. And prayer could look like you just talking to God while you're working. Prayer can look like you saying a prayer before bed or when you wake up or while you're on a walk or whatever that is. Replace that screen time that is just like you not doing anything with an actual prayer, an intentional time of seeking a word from God, right? And then it's also one habit at a time. We can be consistent if we focus on just one habit at a time. Stack bricks, not walls. There's no way you can pick up an entire wall, set it down, and then say boom. But you can pick up a brick, place it, pick up another brick, place it, pick up another brick, place it, and it's slower and it's tedious and it's hard, but it's possible. You just have to show up. The only prerequisite for you is just to show up. There's nothing else. There's no other prerequisite. There's no other requirement. You just have to show up to do it. And so if you just place one small habit at a time. So for me, my small habit is one chapter of Proverbs a day. It's not one book of the Bible a day. So it's not read the entirety of Proverbs on Monday, read the entirety of the Psalms on Tuesday, read, all the stories of, read the whole Catholic epistle series on Wednesday, read all of the Gospels on Thursday. It's not all of that. You don't have to take these big steps and big leaps every single day. We want to have them stack up to a big leap, of course, but it's just one habit at a time. Stack bricks, not walls. Then, if you can, accountability helps, right? For me, accountability is a little bit harder because I don't have that community really that ties me in. I'm primarily doing this by myself. And so accountability is a little bit harder, but that's where you really just got to have, if that's something that you relate to, not having that people group, not having that community to hold you accountable, that's where you really just kind of gonna look in yourself in the mirror, lock in on yourself, and just say, what are you doing? You've got to realize that what you're doing is for you or against you. And so for me, I struggle with accountability because I don't have that group to hold me accountable. So I got to look myself in the mirror and say, am I really the person I want to be? Or am I just defiling myself? Am I just making myself quote unquote worthless, right? Is that what I'm doing? Or am I actually making the right steps to improve my quality of life? I gotta be accountable for myself. And so it could be I I recommend finding a brotherhood, finding a sisterhood, whatever that looks like for you, wherever that looks like for you, whoever that looks like. But if that's just not something that's applicable for you, you just got to look at yourself in the mirror and you've got to hold yourself accountable. And then lastly, I think when it comes to being consistent in our relationship with God, I think when it comes to our bad habits that keep us inconsistent, we just need to replace them, not remove them. Because removing them is dang near impossible. But replacing them is possible. So for example, if you are, let's say, like my grandmother, she was really big on cigarettes for a long time. And like over 20 years, like well over, like I can't even tell you, like decades addicted to nicotine cigarettes. But she had ended up replacing those at one point. I don't know if she still does it now, with like these little like anti-smoking like chewing gum thing, like, you know, like the ones that help you kind of get off nicotine. And so she didn't remove cigarettes. She just replaced her craving for a cigarette with something else. So technically, whenever she's still getting that like craving for another hit, technically she's still taking something for it, but it's replaced with something that's better. So for example, what can this look like for us? Well, like I said, like maybe let's go away from scrolling. Maybe for you struggle with pornography, and that like really, really ties you down in your relationship with God. So whenever you're struggling with, you know, feeling a little like, you know, in that mood, you know, you're wanting to go watch some porn, instead of turning the porn on, you can replace that by just getting up, right? Like it says in scripture to flee from temptation, to flee from that temptation. If you just get up, then eventually you'll train your mind that this association with my desire to watch pornography is countered and met with me standing up. So like for me, like for example, like the oftentimes, and I'll just be vulnerable, like when I do get in that area where I'm like, you know, in that mood and I want to, you know, maybe go watch some things I don't want to watch, like watch pornography. What I do is I just, like, oftentimes it happens in my bed. So I associate my bed with that particular mood. Like, I don't associate that desire to watch porn with, you know, me being outside in my yard. You know, nobody goes outside in the yard to go watch porn. At least, maybe you do. I don't know. Like, but I don't. It's just like an association type of thing. So if I'm trying to fight the the temptation by resisting it in the place where it's most common for me to do it, which is my bed. So if I'm trying to fight on the enemy's territory, which for the battle of pornography is often my bed because I'm laying down, not doing anything, scrolling probably, right? Then the best way to combat that is not to just like try not to watch porn or remove it. Just replace it with being in another place. So instead of laying in bed, stand up, go walk to the bathroom, go walk to the kitchen, go walk to the living room, go walk outside. Whatever, like just standing up. The power of replacing one thing with another can drastically improve your life. And I mean that entirely. When you replace bad habits with a good one, what happens is you gain consistency in the things that you're wanting to do because you're not removing the issue. You're just replacing it with something that is better. It's simple, right? It's simple. It's hard to do, but it's very well possible. And I've got to blow my nose. Where is my tissue at? Guys, another thing, like this has nothing to do with like the message today. I am literally so like congested right now because yesterday I went out into the yard to go like weed eat for a little bit. And, you know, I didn't think anything of it because normally whenever I'm like mowing and weed eating, like we have a pretty big yard. And so it's a lot. It takes me probably about 2 or 3 hours to finish the whole thing on like a riding mower. And so, you know, normally when it's that, like I have this little gator mask that I pull over my nose so I can breathe without having to worry about all the dust and the grass and the pollen and all those things like flying up into my nose. But I had already mowed a few days ago. I just never really weed eated and kind of like really focused around the like tiny detail areas where like, it was kind of bushy around the edges of like the house and things like that. And so I go out yesterday. I'm like, you know what? I don't have that much to do. I'm just going to thug it out. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm just, whatever. I definitely should have, because I woke up this morning, dude, my throat was like just swollen. Like it was so puffy. Like I was draining. I've been draining all day. Like it sucks. That has nothing to do with anything we've talked about, but I just want to share that. But yeah, I mean, just closing out, I feel like, just to recap everything, inconsistency can come from two places. Either you're inconsistent because you don't care enough, or you're inconsistent because you don't have the proper anchor to care enough, right? And so if our inconsistency can be solved in like a linear pattern, I believe. So you have inconsistency. First, gain clarity, okay? Then abide in that clarity. Then take the steps in order to actually keep that clarity, and then seek some encouragement along the way if possible, whether that encouragement comes from you or whether it comes from other people. So it's clarity, abide, steps, encouragement. Find out why it is that you want to do the thing you do. So in a Christian context, find out why it is that you want a relationship with God in the first place. And then you abide in that. You remain in that reason of why. So when you're tempted to go away from that direction, away from your relationship with Jesus, then you can look back to why you want it in the first place. Well, when I'm with Jesus, when my relationship with him is firm, I feel so at peace. I don't struggle with my anxieties. I don't struggle with my porn addiction. I don't struggle with my anger. I don't struggle with my pain. I'm not overthinking. Whatever it is, like when I'm with Jesus, I get this, or this leaves, or whatever it is. If I'm not with Jesus, then I have this, and this stays, or this comes. Realize your why. Don't just say, oh, I want a relationship with Jesus just because, I think it's cool and I want a relationship with Jesus. Like, no. Like, realize why it is. I want a relationship with Jesus because when I'm with Jesus in the presence of God and I'm abiding and submitting to the Holy Spirit as Lord, and I'm listening to the Father and all these things, like I'm listening to God, what happens is I get wiser. When I'm wiser, I feel better. My thoughts are more centered. I have more clarity over the things I want to do in my life. I feel a greater sense of purpose. I'm more at peace. I'm not overthinking all the time. Depression, it stays away. All these things. That is why I want a relationship with Christ. It may be different for you. It may be the same for you. But you have to recognize the why. And then you have to abide in that. So whenever you're tempted to go away from your relationship with Jesus, then that's when we're called to abide. Remember, you got to remind yourself, okay, if I do this, then what's going to happen? My relationship with Christ is going to be at jeopardy. And, then I'll have this X, Y, and Z problem in my life that's really going to make things suck. And so now you're taking the steps in order to avoid that. So, let's put it back into the, doom scrolling thing. Okay, I'm not going to open up my phone first thing in the morning. Well, if it's next to you, if your phone is next to you when you're laying down, how often are you going to be able to say that you're not going to scroll first thing in the morning? So instead of putting your phone next to you in bed every time you go and lay down, maybe put it in a separate room. Maybe put it on your nightstand. Maybe put it on your desk across the room so you can't turn over and reach it, right? Put it in that's taking a step. Put it in a different environment, doing the things, like the little things, replacing the things in order to actually make your walk with Christ more effective. And then there's encouragement. So you can encourage yourself, which is something I have to do often. It's just like, you've got this. There's a bigger purpose, a bigger plan for your life. Remember your calling. Remember the things that you really want to do. Remember your goals for yourself. Remember the goals that God has set for you. Remember that. And for other people, it's just reaching out. It's confession. It says in the scriptures, by confession, we might find healing. And so if you want that healing, go and confess, and then have people hold you accountable. Have people check up on you. Come to people with vulnerability when you screw up and you mess up and you relapse and back into that sin. But that is going to help you long run in order to actually stay within the presence of God, or present in anything. This is not just exclusive to Christianity, which is why I wanted to open up with this episode. Not because I wanted to exclude Christianity, because I wanted to focus on something that everyone relates to, was inconsistency with every aspect of life. Whether that's health, whether that's your relationship with Jesus, whether that's your schoolwork, whether that's your job and financial decisions, whatever that is, inconsistency can kill us all. And so I wanted to open up with this episode because I find it so relieving to know that this can be broken and we don't have to be slaves to inconsistency within our lives. And so this is what I'll leave you with. You don't have to be perfect to be consistent. You just have to be faithful because God calls you to faithfulness, not flawless performance. Consistency is not about a flawless performance. It's about faithfulness. It's about being rooted. It's about being anchored. You don't have to be perfect to be consistent because God calls you to faithfulness, not a flawless performance. Thank you guys so much for listening in to the Soul Hemingway Podcast. I'm your host, Soul Hemingway, and I'm so excited that you actually sat through this one. So if you're new, or maybe, this is just something that you've been watching for a while but never made the commitment, go ahead and press that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or on YouTube, wherever you're watching this on. Go ahead and hit the subscribe. Follow along for the journey. I'm going to be releasing often. I want you to make sure that you are part of this movement, not because it just benefits me and you're doing it for me, but because the information that we talk about could genuinely change your life if you apply it. And so remember, this podcast isn't about us. It's about Him. It's about Jesus. And it's about taking ownership of our faith through faith, clarity, and purpose. Thank you guys so much for listening in. This was the Soul Hemingway Podcast. I'm your host, Soul, and I wanted to thank you once again for watching or listening with us today. Go ahead, if you have not already, join the community, man. Join in on the fun. Subscribe to us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening in on. If you're coming from Instagram, go ahead and follow the Instagram as well if you haven't already. It's it's Soul. There's dots in between every word. And just join on the journey. You know what I'm saying? So, remember, this podcast is talking about everything from faith, clarity, and purpose, and helping you take ownership of your own faith. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.